If you need to navigate to our OEJ website in order to get any of the RFA materials or access the previous webinars, please use dec.ny.gov and navigate to environmental protection, environmental justice, and grant programs. There's also a QR code here on the page if that makes it easier for you to navigate to that section. If you're unfamiliar with WebEx, there should be a button with a speech bubble icon or the word chat where you can click and contribute in the chat and ask questions. Please make sure that you are muted throughout the presentation, and later on we'll have some time for you to unmute and ask your questions. And we'll also read out your questions if we need to that are submitted in the chat. Here's a brief overview of what we'll be going over for today's presentation, some brief grant information, tips for success, how to access the checklist, have a Q&A portion. All right, let's get into it. For this grant, we have webinars 1 and 2 available on our website. The Q&A period ends at the end of today, January 14th. So please submit your questions so that they can be answered in time. And our bids are open until January 28th at 3 p.m. The bid deadline closes for you to submit your application. All Q&A that is entered through January 14th will be available on our website as well for you to refer back to. If you didn't ask a question but something came up, it is likely that someone else may have asked it, and you can access our Q&A on our website to be able to look at past questions. For this grant opportunity, just to reiterate that we are looking for projects to implement a new or existing job training program in the green industries, targeting youth ages 17 to 24 in environmental justice communities. You should be providing tangible occupational skills desired by local and industry employers. The proposal should demonstrate a partnership with those employers, and the proposed training will lead to acquiring a nationally recognized certification, skill set certificate, a certificate degree, or a comparable award. A common question is, what would that certificate or comparable award look like? We don't have, and if we have a specific list, we wanted the language to be more inclusive as we understand everyone's needs will be different for this project, so I can't say yes or no to the certification of completion being acceptable. There are a lot of different variables that go into evaluating, and I'm not the only one who evaluates this during the application review section. That's why I recommend that you consider the following question. Will the certificate or awards help give the participants an advantage and lead to better ensured success in gaining employment in the chosen job field following the completion of the training program? Also, please consider guidance from your training partners that are doing the training, hiring, or aiding in the hiring process once the job training program is complete. The goal should be to make sure that the employers are having a say in what skills and certificates they're looking from for their future employees, and the participants are getting those skills and certificates. Please note that you should have one of the skill certificate or comparable award to be able to give participants by the end of the training program. If you cannot meet these key material for your application or those applied in the RFA, you may not be eligible for this grant opportunity. Okay, some information regarding registration and pre-qualification. Organizations must apply for this grant opportunity on SFS, where you will need to be registered and pre-qualified. All applicants must be registered within the SFS grants management system, and you can find that information on our OEJ website. For pre-qualification, once you're registered with an SFS, not-for-profits must fill out an online pre-qualification application. The application requests an upload of some basic organizational documents and asks straightforward questions about a not-for-profit's capacity and integrity. Not-for-profits can secure their application materials in SFS, where they will be accessible to all state agencies. Note that tribal organizations are required to register, but are not required to pre-qualify to submit a bid for the open grant opportunity. Pre-qualification takes a minimum of 5 business days after you submit in order for it to get approved. So please do not delay in this process. And please double check that you are pre-qualified in SFS, as some pre-qualifications expired just this past November. So please make sure to double check so that you know that you are where you need to be in order to apply. We're about 2 weeks away from the deadline, so please submit your materials as soon as you can in order to be able to troubleshoot. If you're having trouble with getting pre-qualified or submitting anything for your bid in SFS, please call the SFS help desk. Calling them rather than email is the best way to ensure a speedy response. There are 2 phone numbers listed here for you to reach them, and they're open weekdays from 8 to 5. So please make note of that if you need their assistance when you're planning ahead with this in mind. Now to move into some scoring tips. Overall, you have the potential of a maximum of 100 points. This is a process where each question has a designated set of points, with a 75 needing to be your passing score. Please note that those 100 points, because they're designated into sections, all of those add up, even for the smaller points, to be able to get you to the potential maximum of 100. So please answer all questions and get your points, including the optional ones. Just for perspective, if we have everyone come in at a maximum asking amount of $250,000, we can fund 16 projects. So please make sure they're answering all questions, even optional, because this is a competitive grant process. So make sure you do all that you can for your project to stand out. This slide here is an example of one of the questions that you're going to need to answer. This is a lot of text on the screen because it's coming directly from the RFA on page 20. We tried to make the questions and lay them out as detailed as possible as guidance for you how to answer the question. So for this question, for example, for the training program description, note that they are listed out in sections A through E. You should be answering all sections A through E in separate categories. So answer it as A, then you're going to put your ellipses or space and answer for B, etc. For this question example, you would need to provide the participants with a thorough and detailed training course on the subject, provide a sample copy of the examination or explanation of how you would evaluate the participants, demonstrate that the skill is consistent with New York State standards of regulation for the sector, and show that partnerships provide a complete consideration of the support of the industry for the workers, the community, the environment, and the supply chain. So with that example, if you answer A through E, then if all things are in place, you'll be very likely to score the maximum amount of points. To see how you would score, we do also include the point breakdown for you to be able to compare your answer to. So again, please answer all parts of the question in detail. Now to go on to budget. Note we don't have any match requirements for this grant program. That means you don't have to show that you'll be contributing additional money towards the project, though you can if you need additional funding, you are able to do that in accordance with our funding as well, but it's not a requirement. We can fund up to 30% of the total grant award to any one individual salary, including fringe, which is capped at 15% of the total staff salary paid. If you're working with a grant administrator, whether that's internally, contractually, or with a fiscal sponsor, they can receive up to 10% for the role. Please note that if you have multiple open contracts with our office, you must be sure to clearly delineate the funds allocated to staff working on multiple projects so that they do not overlap. Now, to see this in actual application, my colleague Marilyn is going to give you a little bit of an explanation for this example.
Thank you, Alexis. So for this example, we have the assumption that you're coming in with an example award amount of $250,000. Note that I have on the left-hand side of the screen the stipulations and the budget limits for each one of the categories. And so if you come in with $250,000, that means that any one single salary can be funded up to $75,000, including fringe. If you would like to fund a grant administrator role, that will be for the duration of the project up to $25,000. That's 10% for grant administration. If you are a grant administrator in this project and you are within the lead organization that's submitting the bid, then that will go under the personal services or salary category. If you are external to the lead organization, that can go under contractual. And then for fringe, as we mentioned, 15% of the total salary for the project is what we can allocate to fringe. So as the example here, if you want to fund 2 internal employees, you can fund up to $75,000 each for them. So that'll be $150,000 for both positions, including fringe. What this also means is if that is the employees that you'd like to fund under this grant program, 15% of $150,000 is $22,500. So amongst the 2 employees that you wish to fund, that will be a maximum of $22,500 in fringe for both employees. Now, please note that, again, one individual salary can be up to 75,000, so that's including the fringe. So if you'd like to have 3 employees, for instance, on that are covered under this grant program, that will be $225,000 that you can fund, so that's $75,000 times 3. But note that the maximum award amount is $250,000. So if you were to only cover salaries and fringe for the grant, that will be a $25,000 max for fringe for all those 3 employees.
Sorry, there's a technical with Ray's audio as he was speaking on this. So we're gonna try that again. Thank you for letting us know.
All right, can everyone hear me? Okay, So, perfect. Sorry about that. So, I was just mentioning for the SFS application process, it's broken down into 3 sections. There is the questionnaire section where you would answer questions about your organization, as well as answer the questions for the application. Then there's also what's called the period details, which includes the budget and the work plan. So here we have an example of what the budget looks like in SFS. There is a budget project summary that is required. I'm sorry, that's for the next section. There are narratives that are required for your salary. The narratives are just a brief overview of what you are requesting. So for green jobs, the most likely sections that you will be requesting funding are going to be the salary, contractual, maybe equipment, and the other section. So you would go into those sections and list out what you are requesting funding for. The next slide is an example of what the salary section looks like. It confuses quite a lot of people. What you want is the position title. You can put in an individual employee. However, we don't really recommend that in case that employee stops working with you over the project period and you change employees. If you just list the title for that employee, it makes it a little cleaner. We need to know what their annual salary per year is. That's that first highlighted section, annualized salary per position. We need to know how many hours they work a week. The percent effort funded is how much work they are going to be working on our grant. And then the number of months funded is the total project period. If you take the full 36 months, then you can enter that there. And then the grant funds are how much you are requesting to pay that employee out of this project for the full 36 months or the full project period. If your project is only going to last a year, then you would do the 12 months. And however, the dollar amount that was discussed by Marilyn earlier, the 30% maximum, and that is for the full project. It's not 30% per year, it's 30% for the entire project. So if you have any questions when you're filling this out, just let us know. It is pretty simple. The most important things though, the annual salary for the person, and then how much of their work week they will be working on this project, and how much you'll be funding them from this grant opportunity.
This slide also details the FFS grantee user manual starting on page 58. If you have specific questions about that, it does a good job at showing instructional for how to use SFS for the budget and the work plan as well.
So this here is the work plan. It's the third section of the SFS application. What's not shown here is the project summary. The project summary in this section can be as detailed or as brief as you would like it. It is a good opportunity to list out your entire project and all of the steps. For this section that you see on the screen here, this is the objectives, tasks, and performance measures. We are requesting that you keep the whole thing very condensed. We recommend 3 or fewer objectives. A good example might be 1 objective per year per project, for your project. And then you can add additional tasks underneath those objectives. So the main point, though, is that we want to keep this simple and condensed because if it turns it into a checklist, we don't want 50 items that you're going to have to mark off. So try to keep it simple. And again, you can refer to that SFS user manual to enter information on the work plan. You will need to familiarize yourself with that more details tab. If the work plan needs more details, it will prevent you from moving forward until you enter those. But this is just a quick example of what the objective tests and performance measures looks like.
I also wanted I'm going to go over the templates and examples section. This is included on our OEJ website. We have a lot of information on there for you while you're completing the application and afterwards. But for this specific section, there is a organizational guide for you and an example of the budget, the timeline, and the work plan for you to be able to use while you're planning this process out. There's also included there the mapping instructions and photos as examples. As I said, I went over that in detail in webinar 2, but if you would like to see the wording of it, please look to our website for those examples and templates. This is an abbreviated version of the checklist, which you can find in full detail on the last page of the RFA. Please note that our OEJ website hosts a large amount of resources in regards to this. So for example, there is a applicant's grantee documents section that you can use to fill out your key signed documents, for example, and other templates and examples, as well as general information regarding how to complete the grant process on our website. So please use that as a resource and be referring to the checklist throughout the entire process to make sure that you're on the right track with all the things that you need to submit for this. I'm now going to go over some common Q&A that we've gotten. Even after the last presentation, there were some common questions in regards to these, so I'm going to go over them again. Gotten questions regarding, is my project type eligible? Due to the competitive nature of the grant and also all of the different details and analysis that goes into it that's not done by myself alone, I cannot answer that question as a yes or no. I instead encourage people to consider if your project meets the goals of creating skill sets, certifications, and empowering youth that improve the natural resources we have for people to access through equity, sustainability, and tie back to the reduction of greenhouse gases, increase in renewable energy use, and access to robust careers for underserved populations that are historically not in the industry or in leadership positions. As well as, please refer back to the eligibility requirements in the RFA and the detailed questions of the things that you need to include in your project in order to best determine for yourself if you think that your project will be eligible. Another common question I've got is regarding the certifications, the skill sets, or the comparable awards. Please consider, will the certificate or awards help give the participants an advantage or lead to a better ensured success in them gaining employment? Them gaining employment is a criteria for this project. It is a goal for the program participants to be placed in a job at the end of this training program. And consider, are these skills and certificates that your training partners are looking for in their future employees? There needs to be a skill set, certification, degree, or other comparable award, at least one for the participants by the end of the training program. There have been questions regarding the specific percentages for stipends and how to allocate those out, whether hourly rate or otherwise. Note that there are no specific caps or maximums. However, please be sure to consider in explaining your budget what number was chosen and how this number is appropriate for providing support to participants while also not taking away from being able to fund other necessary parts of the project. In other words, the stipend should be able to support participants adequately, but we also want to make sure that they're not so high that it's taking away from other necessary parts of the project getting adequate funding. You may calculate stipends, hourly or otherwise, as you see best fit for your program, as long as it is described for your consideration in the bid. Our payment system works as a advanced 30% of the total award in increments. So for example, step 1 of the nonprofit application, once that's awarded and you get all the necessary paperwork in to start the contract, we would then pay you, the organization, 30% of the total award. The organization needs to use that funding in full and track the funding and submit the necessary paperwork and receipts in order to get the next 30%. That process would then repeat for the next 2 installments of 30%, and so the last 10% that you would get works as a reimbursement once you can submit the necessary paperwork and receipts. All right, thank you guys so much for your time in our presentation. We are going to move on to our open Q&A section so that people can get their questions answered in real time. And we're going to start with the chat if there were any outstanding questions that were posted there. All right, we're not seeing anything there, so please feel free to raise your hand if you have any clarifying questions from the presentation or additional questions.
All right, we see a couple of hands now. Antonio, I'm gonna go with you. We're gonna unmute you now.
We're planning on working with parks, and after, our group would be a horticulture training program with the youth. We would then be working with parks to try to get them into a pipeline to get a job with them. The next step for them would be to basically become a paid intern during the summer. Is that something that would be classified as being hired, or would an internship not work as the next step?
One second. We would qualify an internship as an acceptable placement. We're looking for something they can place on their resume, so that would work. Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you for your question, Antonio. John, I see that you have your hand up and we're going to unmute you.
I have two questions, actually. Are the offering stipends a requirement within the grant? And that the grant money can be used to provide stipends or that kind of thing? And then my second question was that if we're working with say a county workforce development program who would provide the stipends, will that suffice, or is that allowed to have other partners be offering the stipend side of things?
Sure, that's a great question. So the first question, are stipends a requirement? We'll say no, that they are not a requirement under our grant program. We do like to see whether stipends are indeed offered to participants. So please let us know what your plan is for that. But it is not a requirement to include stipends.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to mute you. And then we have a couple more questions for hands. Catherine, I'm going to unmute you.
Yes, so if we have participants go through a stipended training program, and then they become our employees in a more advanced program, would that count as placement, or would that be interpreted otherwise?
I hope my audio is coming through. So that would count, but of course we do want to make sure that your training program is going to be recognized and acceptable at more places than just your own place of employment. But yes, having any placement is going to be favorable.
Thank you.
All right, I see we have Paula. Go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to find out about the timeline. If we, for the grant period, if we, let's just say you mentioned that we could do it for 12 months, or we could do it for the 36 months. Can you explain how the funding would be treated if we had the grant for 12 months versus 36 months? Thank you.
Sure. So our grants have the option of going up to a full 3 years, depending on what your project is. So if your project is only going to be 12 months, you would request the funding and show that you're going to be spending all of it in that 12-month period. That would be part of your project timeline and your objective tests and performance measures. The way our payments work, it was mentioned earlier, we do everything in an advancement basis. So when you are awarded, you would get the first 30%. When you've shown you've spent that 30% by sending us the receipts and your payment documents, we send you the next 30%, and then we do that again. And then once your project is completed and you submit a final narrative as well as any other documents we need, then we close it out and we pay the final 10% award.
Okay.
So yeah, if you have a plan for your project to be less than 36 months, that's perfectly acceptable. Just obviously show us that in your work plan and your timeline, what you plan how long you plan the project to last.
And some people choose where they have done the planning for their project and they submit that through their application, but they use the first 6 months or a year to be able to do different types of like recruitment and things like that before the actual project implementation, working with your program participants, gets started, as an example.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Robert, I see you have your hand up. I'm unmuting you now.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi,
we can.
Robert.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my question was actually related to the one previous about the period of performance, but I did have a couple of clarification questions about that. So the grant period can go up to 3 years. Your project doesn't have to be a 3-year project. It can go anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So if we did a 2-year proposal, for example, that could be acceptable.
Absolutely.
And the maximum award of 250,000 is for whether it's 1 year or 3 years.
Exactly.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Not a problem. If anyone else has any questions, please raise your hand. If there's anything in chat that we didn't get to, I'll take a look. Okay, so everything in chat has been answered. Yeah, if anyone has any further questions, please raise your hand. If there's anything else you need clarification on, just a reminder, today is the last day for Q&A. Any questions that are not submitted, close of business today, which I think is 6 o'clock, 6 or 6:30, will unfortunately not be able to be answered.
If you have additional questions that come up, please email them to ejgrants@dec.ny.gov. That is also included on the presentation here for you to reference. ejgrants@dec.ny.gov. I'm still going to give it some time in case you guys think of something. But I also want to show you that, which I will be emailing this presentation to the registrants for this webinar later, but we have a helpful links slide as well. So please be sure to utilize this as a resource, as well as the links throughout the presentation to be able to get to some of the resources that we talked about easier for you as well.
I think we'll give it to 2:15 if nobody has any further questions. The link to the other webinars is also on our website.
It's right at the top. In the big yellow box, you'll see webinar 1 and webinar 2 recordings available for you.
Yep, that's
And just as a note, those other webinars are going to be hosted on YouTube, so the link will carry you to a YouTube channel. All right, giving one last call for any questions. I'm seeing some thanks. Thank you for attending. We're very appreciative of your interest in our grant program, and thank you for making it what it is. And we're looking forward to seeing all of the proposals come through soon. Just as a quick last reminder, end of day is when you can submit your Q&A. So today is the last day. If you are not yet registered and pre-qualified, make sure that you are. Again, pre-qualification can take a minimum of 5 business days after you submit to get the approval, and you must be pre-qualified at the time of bid submission. So it's very important that you do that.
all right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.